Welcome, everyone. It's great to be back for the new school year and the beginning of another Considering China series, webinar series. I'm Joan Brzezinski, and I direct the University of Minnesota China Center. So I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, the State of Chinese Americans, Data and Discussion. The China Center, along with many Chinese American and educational organizations across the state and the nation, supported the Committee of 100 and Columbia University School of Social Work for this year-long research project and survey that looks specifically at the health, economic, and socio-political issues in the Chinese American community. Today's discussion will share the findings of this extensive project. I'd like to start by thanking our local collaborators for this webinar, the University of Minnesota's Immigration History and Research Center, the Alliance of Minnesota Chinese Organizations, Chinese American Association of Minnesota, the Chinese Heritage Foundation, and the U.S. People's Friendship Association Minnesota chapter. Most importantly, I would like to thank the Committee of 100 and Columbia University's School of Social Work at Columbia University. At the end of the program, we will have time for questions that you submit through Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you find some technical difficulty or need help, please chat with somebody and we will respond. Now I'd like to introduce you to Cindy Tsai. She is the interim president and general counsel for the Committee of 100. Prior to joining the Committee of 100, Cindy was a trial attorney at one of the largest law firms in the country, focused on civil rights and social justice. Cindy is a graduate of Syracuse University and received her JD MBA at Loyola University in Chicago. Welcome, Cindy. Let's get started.
Thank you, Joan, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. As Joan said, my name is Cindy Tsai. I'm the interim president for the Committee of 100. Committee of 100 is a membership-based nonprofit organization founded 35 years ago by 6 prominent Chinese American leaders: Yo-Yo Ma, I.M. Pei, Henry Tang, Oscar Tang, Chen Shengwu, and Shirley Yang. Today, the organization has 140 members, all of whom are American leaders united by their Chinese heritage. Our work focuses on ensuring the full inclusion and participation of Chinese Americans in the United States and encouraging constructive dialogue and relationships between the peoples and the leaders of the United States and Greater China. One way we work towards our mission is by providing policymakers and leaders with unique data points about the Chinese American population. We are proud to have partnered with Professor Gao and her team at Columbia University to produce the State of Chinese American Survey. I think you will find some of the findings surprising. And with that, let me introduce Dr. Gao. Dr. Gao.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and thank you so much, Joan. I'm so happy to be here. I have to say the last time I was in Minnesota was 20 years ago in 2003. I was a doctoral student pursuing my studies, but fascinated by your state. So happy to be here today, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm now going to share my screen. So as Cindy shared, we were so proud to partner last year to conduct this national survey, the State of Chinese American Survey. And our report is titled The Fight for Representation, the State of Chinese Americans 2022. So I present the findings to you on behalf of my co-authors, Jen So and Stacy Tao, both doctoral students in my team at Columbia University, and Sam Collett, a researcher at Committee of 100. This first image shows the trend of the Chinese American population in the United States. So we show the blue bars, which captures the raw number, the counts of the number of Chinese American people in the US. And the yellow line shows the percentage of this population in the US population. So in 2021, the latest year we have data of, Chinese American population reached 5.5 million in that year. And it's one of the fastest growing populations in the US. In that year, the Chinese American population was 1.7% of the total US population. But if we look at the yellow line, we show the ups and downs of this population as a share of the US population. We highlight the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which led to an immediate decrease and persistent decrease of this population as a share of the US population. It is not until 1943, only 80 years ago, when this law was repealed, that we started to see a growth of the Chinese American population, and it soon grew to be very fast, to be one of the fastest growing populations in the United States. Even though our population is growing rapidly, we don't know a whole lot about this population. So our vision for this project is to be the primary source of updated, comprehensive, and accurate data on the state of Chinese American population across regions and across different demographic and socioeconomic subgroups. We want to use our findings to inform policymakers and the public regarding the status, the contributions, the needs of this population, and help develop timely and responsive policies, programs, and services. Our methodology was a survey using self-administered online surveys available in 3 languages: English, simplified Chinese, and traditional Chinese. We had a total of 77 questions across 6 different modules, including 2 open-ended questions. And we will share findings from these modules and questions with you later through the presentation. It's a non-probability sample, but we try to capture the different characteristics of this population in collaboration with over 100 community organization partners, many of whom have representatives in our audience today. So we thank you for your collaboration and contributions. In order for the survey results to be representative of the country, we then created statistical weights using something called post-stratification ranking method, so that the weighted sample distribution matches the population distribution on several key variables, including gender, age, education level, English proficiency, citizenship, income level, and region. So we really mimic the national picture based on Census Bureau survey data. Our final sample size is close to 6,500. This is a reflection of where our sample is from. Over nearly half, 49% is from the West region, 9% is from the Midwest, 26% is from the Northeast, and 16% is from the South. Our survey participants show a very diverse picture, but also increasing a picture of growing up in America. On this image, we saw on the left side where people were born. So 52% of the sample were born in mainland China, followed by 27% who were born in the US, and 8% born in Hong Kong, 6% in Taiwan, and 7% in other places around the world. We then asked the people where you were living at age 12. And we define that as the place of upbringing. If somebody was living in the US at age 12, then we consider that person brought up in the US. So in comparison to this chart of birthplace, we see that 44% of the participants were brought up in mainland China, and 41%, a much larger proportion than the 27%, grew up in the US, followed by 6% in Hong Kong and 5% in Taiwan. Our population is also a very multilingual population. At home, nearly half spoke English and nearly 40% spoke 2 or more languages. So to go over some of these findings, 24% spoke English only at home, 12% spoke English in combination with Mandarin, 9% English and Cantonese, and 3% English, Mandarin, and Cantonese. And then 3% spoke Mandarin and Cantonese in combination. On the right side of the image, we see that 20% spoke Mandarin only at home, 18% Cantonese only at home, and then 2% Chinese regional dialects only at home. So again, it's a very multilingual population. We also asked the people how they thought about their own English proficiency. So this is self-rated. 57% rated themselves as speaking English very well, followed by 22% well, 17% not well, and 4% not speaking English at all. Next, I'm going to share with you 3 main findings that we showcase in our final report. Finding number 1, Chinese Americans overwhelmingly feel accepted in American society, but they also experience high levels of racial discrimination. In this chart, we share the proportion of people who said they felt accepted in American society, Asian American society, and Chinese American society. So the blue portions are those who said they felt accepted. The yellow portions are those who felt they were not accepted. So 77% felt they were accepted by American society, but higher portions, 88% felt they were accepted by Asian American society and 90% by Chinese American society. We also asked people about how they feel culturally, what they felt about their cultural identity. So we asked 3 questions. The first question at the top is about cultural blendedness, whether people feel they are part of a combined culture. 87% felt they were part of a combined culture, a sense of cultural blendedness. 81% in the next bar said they felt they were someone moving between 2 cultures, which in research is termed cultural harmony. 81% felt that sense of cultural harmony. And lastly, we asked people about whether they felt conflicted between the American and Chinese ways of doing things, what is termed as cultural conflict. 58% felt such a cultural conflict, but 42% didn't feel such a conflict. At the same time, we see this population experienced high levels of racial discrimination in the past 12 months. So we asked a set of questions about different kinds of experiences. The first bar is people's experiences of bias and hate incidents. 27% of Chinese Americans had such experiences in the past 12 months. The next bar shows the everyday discrimination experience people experienced in their daily lives, over half, 51%. And then next, even more troubling, 64%, close to 2/3, felt they had racism-related vigilance in their lives. And if we combine the first 3 bars, about 3/4 of the population had any of the above racial discrimination-related experiences. Let's walk through some of these categories in more detail. This next chart shows different kinds of bias and hate incidents people experienced in the past 12 months. The first bar showing that 7% said people vandalized or damaged their homes, cars, or other property. 9% said people physically intimidated or assaulted them. And 20% said people made a racial slur, called them a name, or harassed them, either in person or online. And when we combine these 3 different kinds of bias and hate incidents, about 1/4 experienced any of these hate and bias incidents. This next chart shows what we call everyday discrimination. People just go about with their lives and feel these kinds of discrimination experience such kinds of experiences. So the first bar shows 11% felt that people acted as if they were afraid of them. Next, 26% said they felt they were treated unfairly at restaurants or stores. And then the next bar shows that 46% said they were treated with less respect than other people. So again, daily life experiences. If we combine these three, slightly over half, 51% experienced any of these everyday life discrimination experiences. This next chart shows the vigilance, the worries people have related to safety and racial discrimination. So the first bar shows that 37% felt unease in public areas or worried how other people might look at them. Next, 38% tried to avoid certain social situations or places because they were worried about racial discrimination. And 55% worried about their own or their family's safety from a hate crime or harassment. Again, if these are combined, 64% had these kinds of vigilance in their daily lives. Many people use the open-ended questions to share their worries, concerns, and racial discrimination experiences. But here I highlight a few who said we need to speak up and take action. So one person said, I have not experienced anything personally, but I remain very actively engaged with policies and funding that combat the rise of anti-Asian hate. Someone else said, we patronize Asian businesses in Chinatown and elsewhere where the hate crimes have occurred a lot. And then lastly, someone said, I've attended many rallies in San Francisco, San Jose, and actively follow social media in tracking attacks and incidents targeting Asians. So this is our first finding I want to share with you. The next finding I want to share with you is Chinese Americans are active political participants. The overwhelming majority of Chinese American citizens vote, and they care deeply about issues facing the US society, and they want better relations and more collaboration between the US and China. So this chart shows that 83% of Chinese American citizens were registered voters. And then the next chart shows 88% of the registered voters turned out to vote in the 2020 presidential election. So very high levels of political participation from our study sample. We then asked the people, what are the most important problems facing the US in your mind? So these are the top issues. The Chinese American participants said racism was the top issue, followed by gun control, the economy, jobs and inflation, crime, income inequality, government and political system, and the environment, climate change. So these are the issues most concerning for the Chinese American population. Overall, the Chinese American respondents in our study had high levels of anxiety about the current state of US-China relations. On the left side of this chart, this is everybody in the sample. So 40%, the blue portion, said the current US-China relations are very negative, followed by 49%, the yellow portion said it's somewhat negative. So if we combine these two portions, close to 90% think the current US-China relations are just very tense. On the right side, we divide our sample into 5 groups by education level, moving from less than high school to high school, all the way to more than bachelor's degree. And what this graph shows is the higher the education of the Chinese American population, the more worried, the more concerned they are about the US-China relations. Then we asked the people, okay, do you want the two countries to work together? The overwhelming majority said yes, and they identified some top areas for mutual benefit in their collaboration. So the top area is economy and trade, followed by technology, scientific innovation, environment, climate change, and global security. So these are the top areas for mutual benefit that the two countries should be working on, according to the study participants. We also asked the open-ended question to people. How does this tense US-China relations affect your daily lives. So people tell us give us their narratives. Then we use this word cloud to capture the most frequently appearing words. So we see clear themes. People are worried because their lives, their families, their communities, and their friends, the countries are being affected. They also are worried about media, hate, government, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Those are the keywords that emerged from the narratives shared by people. So the US-China relations is affecting different areas of people's lives, but centered on family, friends, and community. So the third finding I would like to share with you is Chinese Americans are not homogeneous. Even though we are often stereotyped as a model minority, many members of this community face disadvantages and hardships in health and economics, and they need support from policies and services. This first chart shows the income distribution based on household income in the study sample. And we just want to highlight that at the very bottom, 10% of households had annual income that was less than $15,000. And that is roughly about a single household's poverty line based on federal poverty level. So a significant proportion of this population had low income. Next, in this chart, we show that nearly a quarter received some form of assistance. So at the bottom, we see 23% received one or more types of assistance. And at the very top, we show that 11% received public assistance only. So that is a non-trivial portion who needed and received public assistance. Then we also have 2% who received work-related assistance, 2% who received private assistance from family, neighbors, and friends. 1% received veterans benefits, 1% received public housing, 2% received other kinds of assistance, and 4% received more than one types of these kinds of assistance. We also show that in terms of physical and mental health, about 1 in 10 in our study population had at least one disability. That is shown in the bottom bar. Let's go through the different types of disability. So 4% had physical disability only, 2% had developmental disability only, 1% had mental disability, and 1% had more than one type of disability. And also 4% refused to tell us about their disability status or type, probably because of the stigma associated with revealing one's disability status. In this chart, we show different kinds of health disadvantage in this population. So the first bar is recapturing what we just saw. 9% had one or more disabilities. The next two bars in the middle show self-rated physical health and mental health. So 14% self-rated their physical health as either poor, which was 2%, or fair, 12%. And same thing for self-rated mental health. And in research, we consider self-rated poor or fair health to be not that great. So that's a health disadvantage. So if we combine the first three bars, 24% of our population, close to a quarter, had any of these kind of health disadvantages. We also ask people about their subjective well-being. We use two measures, which are shown in this chart. So at the top, we show psychological distress, how people feel in their daily lives. Am I sad, blue, I cannot fall asleep? So that's a measure that captures the short-term psychological distress. And it shows that 8% had severe risk of mental illness. 16% had a moderate risk of mental illness, and 76% had low risk of mental illness. At the bottom, we also ask people, how do you think your current life satisfaction level is? It's also a rating. So 4% had low life satisfaction, 25% had moderate life satisfaction, and 71% had high life satisfaction. So these two measures show that about a quarter, slightly more or less, had either severe to moderate psychological distress or low to moderate life satisfaction. This image shows medical disadvantages or economic hardships, the different kinds people experienced. At the bottom, we show that about a quarter, 23%, experienced some form of medical disadvantage or economic hardship. So these range from 3% who had no health insurance or didn't know if they had any health insurance coverage. 5% of people had difficulty paying bills. 8% had hardships in food, whether they ran out of food or worried about running out of food before having money to buy more. And 14% delayed medical care or didn't get the needed medical care. So we shared three main findings in three different domains. And based on these findings, we want to share the following policy and practice recommendations. First, to promote greater equity and inclusion of Chinese Americans, we want to advocate for the incorporation of Asian American history lessons across all levels of education. We want to advocate for more funding for language access to improve service access to Chinese Americans, especially those with low English proficiency. We also want to promote more community programs and organizations that could bring these services to directly to Chinese American communities. And we want to support the establishment of clear guidelines on addressing and responding to reports of anti-Asian hate and discrimination. Secondly, we want to continue to support the increasing levels of political engagement and reduce the negative impact of US-China relations on the lives of Chinese Americans. So we want to increase the get out of the vote efforts and political mobilization, especially at the grassroots levels. We also want to actively discourage and speak up against the usage of negative language in discussion of US-China relations. We want to increase opportunities to have meaningful conversations about political and civic engagement among civic engagement issues among both Chinese Americans and across different racial ethnic groups. Lastly, we also want to advocate for the noticing and addressing of the health and economic needs of the Chinese American population. So more services and assistance are needed in different languages and dialects to support the Chinese Americans in need. We also would like to help facilitate discussions of disadvantages and hardships to dismantle the model minority stereotype. We also want to support culturally informed services and resource outreach to encourage and improve access to support and services. And lastly, to increase the number of bilingual, culturally competent and Chinese and Asian American mental health and social work professionals to support this population. Again, you can help us to continue promote the survey findings and encourage people to read our results and talk about these findings. We also would like to invite you to participate in our next year's and future surveys if you are invited to participate. Feel free to reach out to us both at Columbia University and Committee of 100. And thank you so much. We look forward to engaging in a conversation with you. Thank you. Joan and Haiyan, I turn it over back to you. Thank you.
Joan, you're on mute.
I did unmute it, but didn't unmute, whatever. I thank you so much for such a fascinating discussion. I know that I believe Charles and his team are going to handle the Q&A from here on out. We have one question in the Q&A, and I encourage others to place their questions there so that we can continue our conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, so Dr. Gao and Cindy, we were, and Joan and Hyen as well, obviously help answer these questions, but there's a couple we were able to easily answer, I think, online. But one question that just came in was, indeed, Chinese Americans do vote, but how do you explain the lack of participation maybe in either running for political office, either locally or nationally, and having more Chinese Americans in the API population involved in voting and running for positions?
Thank you so much for that great question. I can start, but Cindy and Joan and Hyen, please feel free to join too. I agree. Within the Chinese American population, we don't seem to have a strong tradition of running for office. But I think maybe part of the unexpected outcome of the pandemic and also the rise in anti-Asian hate, anti-Asian, anti-Chinese discrimination has fueled a new wave of political participation, both in terms of voting actions, but also people who want to step up and say, I want to be an active participant, either as an activist or as a potential candidate. I do see in recent years there are more Chinese Americans and other Asian Americans who stand up and become candidates. I'm in New York City, and there are a number of local candidates who are Chinese Americans. So I also see the young people are increasingly mobilized, high school students who are more active than the older generations in their school governments, in their local communities. So this takes a long time, but I think by having these conversations, by seeing role models who just are not afraid and may fail, but we see more role models who are active in the political arena. And I think Committee of 100 is playing a leadership role in this regard to talk to different policymakers and having conversations on the Hill and across the nation with the local organizations. So we have certainly done some work. We have more to do, but I'm hopeful that more people will become political candidates and participants, and we will together advance this cause. Thank you for the question.
Dr. Gao, another question that came in, this one over email this time from there as well, but was asking about the results of the survey and if there's one point that especially shocked you in the research team. Was there something that took you back to say, I didn't know that, or I was very surprised by that particular finding from there as well?
What a great question. Thank you so much. I would share 2 points. One is just how incredibly this population is so diverse. I mean, coming into this study, I anticipated that, but because now we have the data in the demographic characteristics, the economic and health and political views, nothing is a simple story. So we see a lot of diversity in representation in the different voices that's captured by the close to 6,500 people who participated in this study. So nobody can assume Chinese Americans are a homogeneous group in terms of political voting behavior or anything else. So I think this population is just very rich and complicated, and they deserve a lot of research and attention to be understood. My team are trying to do further research across different regions, across different generations, and where people move from. So a lot of diversity, even across all those different layers, we are already showing the rich layers of the story. Secondly, I knew, anti-Asian hate was rising high. And living in New York, I personally and my friends and family had many experiences of racial discrimination firsthand. I thought New York was bad, but this report shows nationally it's also terrible. So I think the Chinese American population and others who may look like us have suffered a lot in recent years in the rising racial discrimination. So we need to continue monitor this and be aware. Seeing more people are speaking up, which is great. And that also hopefully will support and promote more political participation and maybe other forms of activism, such as speaking out using arts or through school venues or in local communities. This also gives us an opportunity to reach out to other racial ethnic groups. We cannot do this alone. And there are other communities who suffer from racial discrimination. So I think this is a wake-up call that more dialogue, more alliance building is needed because nobody can do this alone. So 2 points, and again, more to come. Thank you.
Great answer, Dr. Gao. The questions are coming in fast and furious here from that standpoint as well. So obviously great interest in your presentation from there as well. One of these I'll combine with another question that we got in from there as well. But looking at the differences in the responses between various Chinese American populations, or how does this compare to AAPI populations as well as other minority groups in terms of some of the research findings you may have found?
So this is again is a great question. We are doing more work to compare our findings with other groups, both those in the AAPI community, but also beyond the AAPI community. So we need to do more. And part of the challenge is not every survey have all the same measures. So we need to do more comparative studies. But what we show in this study is, in many regards, we are not so different from some other groups. So for example, the racial discrimination results we showed, I think some may be surprised to see that Chinese Americans are at this high level of racial discrimination experience, which typically are attributed to some other racial minority groups. But I think that's sobering to know. Another myth is that Chinese Americans are doing well economically. And the third finding I showed show us that's not always true. And a substantial group of our population are actually suffering from all different kinds of challenges. In my research in New York, we show that Asian Americans actually experience comparable levels, similar levels of economic hardships and poverty as compared to Blacks and the Latinx communities. So we are not so-called the minority, the model minority. But I agree with you, more work needs to be done, and we need to be also thoughtful to be sure we are using the same measures, same benchmarks when we do comparative studies. In terms of within our study, what we see, we are at the preliminary stage of doing these studies, comparing different generations, comparing where people were born, where people grew up. One interesting finding I recently discovered is a higher proportion of people who were born in mainland China consider their English to be not that, consider themselves to be having limited English proficiency. And it's interesting to me because I talk to people with high education levels who to me speak English very well, but their self-rated English proficiency is not as high as those born elsewhere. So I'm wondering why that is, whether it's the standard or whether it's cultural exposure, things like that. So a lot more work to be done, but that is one interesting finding so far that we recently discovered. Thank you.
Dr. Gao, as a researcher, you're rooted in science, you're rooted in fact, and you're rooting in what you can prove from that standpoint as well. From a fact-based perspective, do you feel that life satisfaction and mental health has a direct correlation with economic well-being? Did the data show you that within the confines of that research?
That's a very good question. So we haven't looked at the correlation using statistics. We can do that. What we currently show is a high correlation between mental health and life satisfaction, which we know probably broadly, but we need evidence to show that. Economic well-being in the literature is related to subjective well-being, but they are not a linear correlation, right? So what we see in the literature is not only the absolute level of your economic well-being or resources, but what matters more is the inequality. So how you compare with your neighbors, with your other community members, that actually matters more to one's mental health and life satisfaction. But we can look more into our data to see how closely they are related and whether it's the hardships or level of resources and income people have, or some kind of relative position in the society that matters more. Thank you for the great question.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Yao. Keeping obviously your feedback anonymous here, because obviously we have people who answered the survey and gave real world examples of what happened to them from there as well. Can you comment more on the stigma that Chinese Americans face when they're asked to disclose past experiences related to racism? Why do you feel they're stigmatized to this extent?
That's such a great question. If you have an opportunity to read the full report, in the report, we quote a number of quotes people offered, of course, anonymously, but they are just sobering and just a wake-up call for my research team. As we monitored the survey returns, we had to have team meetings to discuss and actually to address the secondary trauma my team was having to experience just by reading and receiving these survey respondents. That's on top of everybody's actual experience living in New York, riding subway, walking on the street, having these kind of experiences and media exposure. So it was certainly very tough. But we felt we couldn't not ask about this. Doing research, one thing is simple, and I know it for sure. You don't study it, nobody will know about it. And in surveys, if you don't ask about something, you will not get the data. So we made the decision to ask about this. And the open-ended questions are totally optional. I mean, any question is optional. People can say, choose to skip any question they don't feel comfortable answering, even within the quantitative multiple choice questions, such as the ones for racial discrimination experiences. But the open-ended questions are totally open, but at least 1/3 of our study respondents, that's over 2,000 people, voluntarily entered their responses to those open-ended questions. Again, 2 questions. One was about racial discrimination. The other was about how their lives are affected by the US-China relations. And when we combed through the responses, the 2 overlap because they are layered on top of each other, right? The US-China relations tension fueled the racial discrimination and the bias against this population. And then these experiences make people more worried. So in the report, we quote people saying, I feel excluded in workplace. People don't want me to be involved in certain kinds of business. Some people say, I need to carry my passport everywhere I go because I worry about how I will be treated if they discover and I want to show I'm a citizen. But the sad part is, in terms of racial discrimination and hate and bias, the attackers don't check your passport before they make the attack. So it's very troubling and sobering. So it's a choice. And I think going forward, we want to monitor this So we want to continue include those questions. What we find in New York, so in New York City, my team started in 2020 to start asking these questions of racial discrimination to the Asian American population, primarily Chinese American population. What we found from 2020 to 2021, 2022 is it seems like the pandemic is becoming leaving us. Maybe not now because the winter is coming again. It seems to be coming back a little bit, but racial discrimination experiences didn't go away. It's still continuing, and in some of these measures, it's actually increasing. So this continues to be a troubling finding, and I hope we all will pay attention and talk about it. In my home, I had to talk about these experiences and how to deal with them with my young children, because they are also subjects of this discrimination and attacks.
Yeah.
So by talking about them, they are empowered not just to be targets, but to have agency to react, to be in more control. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that if I can add a little color to that, Dr. Gao, as well, I think as a communications professional, it was sobering to read those answers because people have a tremendous amount of trust in bearing their soul in terms of what had happened to them and becoming vulnerable in sharing those stories. And I think that's incredibly rewarding because I think it added to the insights that we were able to provide as part of this report. And then even more specifically as well, and part of the reason why Committee 100 and Columbia University are teaming on this and trying to get this information out to as many people as possible is because as a white man from New York, to read about those experiences from there as well, I've never experienced those issues, right? I don't have a fear of walking down the street from there as well, or needing an escort in some cases from there as well, or worrying about a language barrier or things of that because of a reported incident. There's things that I think you can be empathetic about and understand what other cultures go through as part of that, as we're all part of America from there as well. But there's certain racism and understanding and having those real conversations, I think is critically important to how we fix the problem from there as well. So I just want to add that color a little bit from there as well, just in terms of a little perspective. I know we're coming up on time, but if I can get two more questions in, maybe Dr. Gao from there as well. One of them, I think that was asked related to people, when they filled out the survey, they self-identified from there as well. One of the questions came in is that, did the research data reflect mixed race Chinese Americans? Is that going to be a separate category in the future?
Sure, great question. So the inclusion criteria for this survey is, again, based on self-identification, that they are 18 or older, adult, and they consider themselves with Chinese origin or ethnicity, Chinese heritage. So these does include people of mixed race, if they identify as of Chinese origin or heritage, they are included. A third inclusion criteria is that they had to be living in the United States at the time of filling the survey. So we did find some surveys that were filled overseas based on the IP address, and we had to exclude them from the final report, even though some of these might be long-term US residents. So we right now don't have a big enough portion of the sample who are of mixed race to do a in-depth analysis of this population. But yes, this population is included. We also, for those who have partners or spouses, we ask about the race or ethnicity of their partners or spouses, and we have a good portion in so-called mixed racial marriages, which we can also look into as well. Thank you.
Dr. Gao, are there any specific changes or updates you're looking to make to the survey for the following year based on lessons learned from this year?
That's a great question. We are actually working on that. So this being the first year, it was a great learning experience for me and my team and for our collaboration. with the C100. Charles, you have been such a great supporter to us. So one change we would like to make is to shorten the length of the survey somewhat. So last year we had 77 questions, which was a bit long. We did want to cover all these different domains to provide a holistic picture of the state of Chinese Americans, which we did. But then we want to relieve some of the burden of filling out the survey for some of our participants. So we are looking to shorten the survey somewhat so that we keep only the most essential questions. So that's one. Secondly, we are looking into using a probability sample. So this year we partnered with a lot of local community organizations to reach a national sample. But because of the design, it's not a probability sample. So to make sure it's really representative of the national picture, we are looking into using a probability sample so that we have greater confidence in the sample results in terms of capturing the national picture. Thank you.
Great. Dr. Gao, were there any particular data segments you found most interesting? I think it's a little bit tied to that surprising question from there as well, but that's another one of those.
That's a great question. So it's hard for me. I think this is like a baby I gave birth to, of course, joint with my co-parent committee of 100. I love every aspect of the study and of the data. But my research team has, as I shared, my co-authors who have expertise in each of these areas. So in my research team, Jen So is particularly focused on cultural identity and racial discrimination aspects. And Stacy Tao particularly focuses on economic well-being and insecurity and needs and policy supports. And Sam Collett from Committee of 100 is more expert on the political aspect of the study. So we have a very strong team that we want to continue to look at these different aspects. We last year wanted to look at some other aspects such as education, which is a hot topic among the Chinese and the Asian American population. We didn't have the room to include those questions. And we also are constantly brainstorming to think, okay, in a future survey, what kind of specific modules or segments we would like to ask about to gain a deeper understanding. So for example, this year, affirmative action is a hot topic. We were not able to include it last year, but maybe in a future survey, we can talk about the specifics about this policy. What does it mean for this community? So we are constantly reviewing the different topics and modules and segments of the study, and we look forward to receiving your feedback. If you have suggestions or thoughts, we welcome them. Thank you.
Final question, Dr. Gao. This is the last one. We talked about in the survey, we talked about obviously the findings, then we talked about the recommendations. What, in your opinion, is how can we take the recommendations and turn them into action? What would be ways for this audience to do that?
Thank you so much. So we are sharing these findings with many different organizations nationally, such as yours. And I think you know your local state, including politics and services, better than we do. So we welcome your thoughts and your initiation of ideas of how to bring those to the local community. At the national level, I know Committee of 100 are bringing these findings to lobbyists, political actors to help us advance that agenda nationally. But at the local level, I think we need to find good match points where we see most likely to make a move. So for example, in New York, we have one community partner organization, the Chinese American Planning Council, CPC. They were early supporter of this effort. And their focus is to increase access and funding to community members in need to bring those services to them. So that's one point where they see them taking action. We are talking to some local schools where they see the education piece is more salient. Yep. So I think at the local level or at your organizational level, you can think about what really speaks to you, where you can make the voice better heard and push action forward. We are happy to support you if you need certain aspects of the finding to be showcased or to be used for any kind of advocacy. We're happy to be partners. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add from a marketing and communications perspective, I think it's important to continue having wonderful discussions like this organized by Joan and Haiyan here to keep that conversation going. I know that we're continuing to take parts of the report. We've shared the links for the report in the Q&A as well, so please download it from there as well. It's 60 plus pages of content and charts and graphs. We're continuing to put those out on our social media handles as well. We get phone calls from reporters at least once a week asking for specific information or the like as well. And we expect that'll continue for the rest of this year from there as well. So that's what's critically important, is to continue to have these discussions. I think that you saw that as part of the Q&A, Dr. Gao, as well, that people are wondering, how can we move this conversation forward? This is one way of continuing to do that. It's not the only way, it's just one way from there as well. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Joan Haiyan for any closing comments from there as well. Thank you, Dr. Gao.
So I saw that you had shared the link to the survey with everyone, and so I just put it in the chat. So anyone who's attending here today can get that, but you can regularly get this off our website and certainly the Committee of 100's website. So thank you, Dr. Gao. This was such a fascinating discussion. I really appreciated you bringing us this data and sharing your knowledge and your discoveries on it. It's really very fascinating. And I'd like to thank the Committee of 100 for inviting us to participate in this study and promote this and share the word. Thank you, Charles. That was really fun to work with you and Dr. Gao, and we look forward to the next survey. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Hope you found our discussion stimulating. Thank you for the support to the China Center and the Considering China webinar series. Our special thanks to Kai Mei and Joseph Terry for their generous support of our programs. And we invite you to help us advance the mission of the China Center through the link on the webinar announcement or on our website. Your support helps make these kinds of programs possible. Look forward to talking to Dr. Gao and Charles next year when the following survey is
Absolutely. We look forward to it.
Thanks everyone. Have a great
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Have a great
Thank
semester.
you so much. Thank you.
Take care.